4 Israeli military helicopters have landed southwest of the Syrian capital, carrying out a ground operation for several hours. It follows a second round of Israeli airstrikes in the Damascus countryside within a 24-hour period. Syrian state media says the attacks were targeting a former army barracks in Kiswa. Earlier this week, airstrikes on the town killed 6 Syrian soldiers. Well, joining us now live from Montreal in Canada is Mouin Rabbani. He is a non-resident fellow at the Centre for Conflict and Humanitarian Studies. Mouin, thank you for joining us on Al Jazeera. Just put this into context for our audience. How significant is this latest Israeli incursion into Syria?
Well, I think it needs to be understood in the broader context of Israel insisting that Syria cannot exercise sovereignty over its own territory, and that Syria will be prohibited from deploying any troops or weaponry south of Damascus, in other words, within Syria. What we're told about this raid is that the 6 soldiers who were killed yesterday, according to the Syrian authorities, stumbled across some eavesdropping equipment, and the Israelis bombed and killed them, and then today sent the commando force into Kiswa on the M5 highway, the main highway between Damascus and the Jordanian capital Amman, apparently to retrieve additional eavesdropping equipment, and presumably the casualties are much higher than indicated by the Syrian authorities.
And Mouin, in a statement from Syria's Ministry of Foreign Affairs, they've called this a gross violation of international law and the United Nations Charter. Of course, the backdrop to this is there was an incursion earlier this week near the Mount Hermon foothills. So what does this say about Israel and its respect for international law and another country's sovereignty?
Well, what the current Syrian leaders seem unable to understand is that international law and Syrian sovereignty are entirely irrelevant as far as Israel is concerned. It's quite clear that Israel has been engaged in a systematic campaign to keep Syria weak, off balance, and preferably divided. And it's been encouraging also Druze separatism in the south, in the region of Sweda. The current Syrian leadership has done everything within its power to make nice with Israel in an attempt to placate it, but that's simply impossible. I mean, you can't, play ball with a rabid dog. And the Syrians need to understand that essentially there is nothing that they can do to mollify the Israelis, because they will simply interpret weakness as an invitation for yet more aggression. I think the important question now is that the backers of Syria's new regime in the Gulf states and Turkey and so on, who have invested so much political capital into both supporting stability in Syria, into getting Western countries to lift sanctions from Syria, and who are very concerned that Syria could turn into another Iraq and form a threat to their own national security, will they now use their influence to get Washington and Brussels to call off the Israelis, or will, as in the case of the Gaza Strip, simply look the other way and hope it turns out for the best for them?
And Mouin, Israel says that it will not retreat from its positions on the Syrian side of Mount Hermon, but there are reports that there are talks happening between both sides. What kind of guarantees would both Syria and Israel be seeking?
Well, I think what Syria is hoping to reach with Israel is a more or less non-aggression pact. The problem is that the Syrian leadership seems to think that if they allow Israel to dominate Syria, then Israel will allow the Syrian leadership to dominate Syria as well. But it doesn't work that way. I think the real question is, with this escalating Israeli aggression, is the agreement that many have predicted that's going to be reached between Syria and Israel at the UN General Assembly next month, is that still going to happen? And if it does, will that create a domestic backlash against the Syrian leadership from its own citizens?
Mouin, thank you for that analysis. That's Mouin Rabbani, a non-resident fellow at the Centre for Conflict and Humanitarian Studies.
Thank you.
Don't miss out, get the full picture. Subscribe to Al Jazeera for reliable news and expert insights. Like, share, stay ahead.